Frontline Baddies. Welcome to episode 4 of the Frontline Baddies podcast. It's released on a Friday, so happy Friday. Before we get into the episode today, I think it's important to recognize Frontline Baddies operates off of the north of Turtle Island. We strive for decolonization, land back, and acknowledgement of continued colonization through the Canadian government. We are a group of humans that are Indigenous, refugee, immigrant, and settlers to Turtle Island. We acknowledge our ancestors' plight for us to be here. We acknowledge our siblings' trauma in this line of work. We did not choose it, it chose us. So today, if you're just joining for the first time or listening for the first time, hello, my name is Danny. I'm a part of the Frontline Baddies crew. And with me on this podcast are co-founders Eileen and Tracy, all the way in Calgary. And we just want to be able to talk and spread awareness and cultivate community with this podcast and with the work that we do with Frontline Baddies. And today we are going to talk about self-care.
Yeah, we are.
Woo!
Woo!
Which is very exciting.
Self-care.
And as per Tracy, actually, we are going to do a check-in question about how we feel about self-care.
Yeah, I love them check-in questions. It's funny, honestly, because one of my team members was like, "Of course you would," when she listened to the podcast episode the other day. She's like, "Of course you would put that in there," and I was like, "Duh." Yes. So the question is super simple. How do you feel self-care is utilized in frontline work and the narrative behind it? Super easy. Just like super, super easy for all of us in this room.
Super simple.
I'll go first. Hate it. Absolutely hate it. Lots of resentment. Lots of resentment behind this term self-care.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the episode's titled Rage Against Self-Care for a reason.
Yeah, I hate it. I resent it. There's lots of bitterness from my end behind the term self-care because it's constantly being weaponized against not just me but other frontline workers in this field, and I have lots of mixed feelings around it, and the hijacking of its meaning and authenticity has been drained out of it due to capitalism and colonization, unfortunately. And, I'm all about taking steps and doing the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves, to heal and to regulate ourselves. But the way that self-care is being marketed to us is no longer what it used to mean, and it's lost its authenticity.
I agree. I feel like sometimes we're an echo chamber when we say that, but it's definitely been weaponized against me in a lot of situations, whether they're personal or professional, at work. Whereas I don't feel like in my personal life it's weaponized against me so much because my people who see me know that I care for myself. Like, they know I show up for myself and for them, and they show up for me as well, right? And that's that community piece. And thinking about Frontline Baddies, like, truthfully, we started Frontline Baddies due to the burnout we were going through from this narrative of self-care. And like, well, just take better care of yourself. And it's like, well, how am I supposed to do that if, what I'm experiencing is a daily macroaggression against like who I am as a human, like based off my race or my sexuality or my gender or whatever, or like my neurodivergence. Like, that's not me not taking care of myself. That's other individuals attacking me and them not being held accountable for their poor behavior. Danny had a point I want to say it was like episode 2 in our podcast around like who are we actually putting the blame on? And like in that context, it was around our street baddies versus like the politicians and where the money, taxpayers' money is going. But I feel like that same idea can be utilized here as well. As like, why is the blame being put on us as frontline workers that we're not taking care of ourselves? When how are we going to take care of ourselves when we only have $500 a year for therapy? And that equating out to 2.5 counseling sessions. But in a week, we can see anywhere between one severe critical, upwards of 15 or 20, and 2.5 sessions is supposed to help us with that. Like that doesn't make any sense. It's not sustainable. It's not showing care for us. And we're not getting paid enough that we can go see a counselor even more. And for a lot of these agencies, they even have EAP programs, but those usually cap out too at like maybe 10 sessions a year. So in total, maybe we get 12 sessions a year in total, which is one a month, like one counseling session a month for how much trauma we experience or see every day at work. Like that's not us not caring for ourselves. That's our companies not caring for us.
100%.
Do you have any thoughts or planners?
Thoughts or points? It's just such a big thing. I mean, it really makes me angry when I think about continuing on with what Tracy was saying around what's provided as forms of self-care that could actually be somewhat helpful, and how not accessible it is, but then also just, really trying to capitalize on things that, are considered self-care, but are maybe not self-care really for some of the things that we are all experiencing in this line of work. And I don't know, it's just really frustrating. And it's frustrating because I think that a lot of people that I've worked with in frontline as well, like it's not necessarily just coming from the agencies necessarily, but it runs so deeply that even people that are working within this line of work are like, I'm not able to do self-care. They're not, because the way that they think about it is so different. But the things that we need are most so around, therapeutic practices and cultural practices and things like that. I don't know. Forming it for the individual and what they're needing, aside of just putting a blanketed statement over it to think like, oh, well, everyone will just get one session a month if they want to, if they're able to get in to see a counselor, number one. Yeah. If that person's going to be trauma informed, number two, and, they'll take a bubble bath and they'll be fine. And that's just not what's going to help every single person, especially in this line of work.
Yeah. Colonization and capitalism has completely hijacked and changed the meaning of self-care and has twisted it in a way where, yeah, like I said, it's being weaponized on us because, a lot of these self-care practices have historically been rooted in marginalized communities, such as indigenous cultures or, other cultures, and they're being taken advantage of by these corporations that realize that they can like profit from marketing and promoting these practices as self-care and taking away the authenticity and
community
and cultural meaning and sacredness behind these practices, and just commodifying it into these like meaningless forms of self-care that aren't actually self-care and are actually causing more harm than anything. Like, how am I supposed to self-care myself out of microaggression, racism? Like, I go to work, I experience all these things that are perpetuated on me, and then I'm told, go home, take care of yourself, have a good sleep, drink some tea, light a candle, do all the things. And, that responsibility is now put on me. And when I go back into work and I'm experiencing the same racism and microaggression and, da da da, and I'm still being affected by it, it's the finger's still pointed at me being like, well, you clearly didn't do the job and take, you didn't self-care yourself enough, because you're clearly still being affected by it.
And then it's like it becomes a vicious catch-22, because now if you weren't stressed out before, now you have your management team telling you, we see you're stressed out. This is unacceptable to be this stressed out. What are you not doing to fix your levels of stress showing up in this work? Not like that's what they're saying and doing versus what it could be. And it could be something like, hey, you're super stressed out. What's going on? Like, where are you at? What can we do to help support you through this? Because we understand how stressful this work can be. You become the problem versus like acknowledging our society and how our society views what we do as the problem, and how like stressful this work is due to all of the barriers all of us from frontline all the way up to being a CEO experience and trying to get funding and in trying to do this work and trying to help our communities. But it is really aggressively targeted towards us, that we're the problems, when we're not the problem. The problem is the lack of resources all of us have, including the people that we are trying to help and walk alongside of.
Yeah, no, it totally makes
Absolutely.
sense. And like, oh, I feel like a lot of the times when I'm already like stressed out and burnt out from things happening to me at work within the job, but then my supervisors and management are almost like making it worse by treating it as an individualized issue and not taking any accountability or responsibility for not taking care of their staff. Because again, like they the idea of self-care is like, you're being told to do it by yourself and you should go home and take care of yourself by yourself. But what we need to realize, that true self-care involves community care. Like community care is self-care. And without community care, there isn't self-care. Like I don't think it's possible to do it, because as humans, like we're social beings. Like we need that village, the village pitching in to uplift individuals who are struggling, and to enforce this idea of self-care in the mainstream way doesn't include that, and that's quite harmful.
The colonizational tool of hyper-independence is what it is, right? That you don't need your community. You don't need other people. You can just do this by yourself. And that's what like North America really is right now, is that mentality, is that mindset. And the issue with that is something as simple as a bubble bath, for example. In a lot of Indigenous communities, there are cleansing ceremonies that water is involved in, and that you are spending, like as a human involved in that ceremony, you're spending a bit of time in the water or fully immersed in the water, and you're letting the water do its healing and have its natural properties heal different pieces of you. And there is something to be said, though, that many of those ceremonies are done with other community members, not just by yourself. And now, like, one of the staples of self-care is this bubble bath with all of the candles lit, and that thing that goes over the tub where you put your snackies or whatever else you want to put on that, and maybe a glass of wine or whatever. And, and you got to have the soft, comfy bathrobe, and you got to have the tie for your hair if you have long hair, so your hair is like up in this like cute little messy bun. And like that's what's been packaged to us as what is self-care. And a lot of us already in Frontline joke about that and make jokes about that. Yeah, I'm just going to take a bubble bath when I get home, because we know outside of Frontline, that's what people's ideas are of self-care. I would argue it's a form of self-love, but like, is it actually self-care? Like, I don't know. I don't know. But a lot of frontline workers are we call that out on a regular basis because it's just like that's not it. That's not the move,
It's
right?
not.
Yeah.
But when we're sat back and when we look at like what actually is self-care, like I was always taught you're stronger in a community than you are by yourself. So why am I trying to heal myself by myself when I'm already like not in a good spot to be doing that? That makes no sense.
Yeah, and hot take is my hot take is that these agencies and society as a whole are banking on us not uniting as a community because, when you come together as a community, people are more comfortable vocalizing the issues that are being perpetuated on them. And, nobody likes a whistleblower. So if we keep everybody individualized and nobody talks about their problems, maybe no one will talk about any of like the bigger, like nobody will point out what the real issue is, what the bigger issue is, and hopefully nobody noticed that these agencies are trying to wipe their hands of the responsibility of taking care of their staff.
But yeah, because they're barely funded to be doing what they're doing currently. So then to have to fund to take care of staff on top of that means even more money. And where is that money going to come from?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Like, truthfully.
And going back on what you said, Tracy, like the things that are commodified in the self-care culture, like, these candles are costing what, like $25-$30 per candle, and bath bombs are expensive. And
I can't get over that. When did candles become so expensive?
I always
What?
that's like one of the things that bugs me the most in life is how expensive candles
How did
are.
I know you were going to bring up candles on this podcast?
Because
At one point, I knew we were going to have this
there's
candle
rage in my
discussion.
heart about how expensive candles are, because I just don't think wax should be that expensive.
Wax.
You
The
know,
wax tax for sure.
nice smelling wax shouldn't be $30. And
Yo, my auntie makes candles, and I'm not gonna throw out her name on this or her company, but they're all natural. So I'm seeing her this summer, Eileen, and I will give you some of her candles.
thank you. Please send me all the candles, everybody.
Any in the comments, give us your candle recommendations for
And,
self-care.
and that's the thing, like we have to go out and buy all these things, and even if these things were actually helpful for our healing and our self-care, like if you're not able to afford it, if you're low income, like that's a lot of gatekeeping of who can access self-care, right? And
If that's your definition of it, yeah.
a lot of these self-care practices were originally rooted in different cultures. For example, indigenous cultures, um, you know, sage is very common amongst these cultures to use to burn to a part of ceremony and sort of, a part of sacred practices.
Mhm.
But now they're being exploited, and these wellness industries are coming in realizing that they could really market the idea of burning sage, and all these people are buying it because they want to ward off all the negative vibes. And there was an over harvesting of white sage, and these communities that were originally practicing these ceremonies using these medicines are no longer able to access them as easily because they're all being over harvested and exploited and sold and for like such a high price. Like they jack up the prices, whereas like indigenous communities would just share amongst each other. And it takes away from the history and the authenticity behind the usage of sage.
Yeah. Well, it colonizes sage, right? Because just in case not enough has been colonized in, indigenous community, culture, language, people. Might as well go for the medicine too.
Yeah.
Like they got to round it out, of course.
If you can make money, they'll take it.
And I say that as sarcastically as I possibly can, in case we struggle with identifying tones, if anyone struggles with identifying tones. The white sage scarcity would definitely hit the indigenous community hard. And I remember one of my friends at the time, she had her own medicine garden. And my friend, she is one of the coolest people I think I have ever met. And she is a youth counselor like for Indigenous youth and is Indigenous herself. And she had this little garden of all of these different medicines from seedling on up is how she grew them. And every year she would always make posts on her Instagram page of like the progress of the medicine and like how much it meant to her. And I vividly remember watching that and like knowing that we're in an urban setting where, you know, trying to plant things in general is like difficult, especially if you rent and like all of the things that go into like being a gardener without access to a garden. The amount of hope that it brought me every time I saw one of her posts of like her seedlings or her like little babies, and they're just like growing a little bit more and a little bit more. And that was the reason that she had started it, was because there was scarcity and she didn't want to contribute to that. And she wanted to be able to like share with her community. And she's made a lot of medicine over the years for different individuals in terms of like balms and smudge kits and like the list goes on with her, because that's just what type of human she is. It was pillaged. I'm using that word intentionally. White sage was so pillaged that the Indigenous communities felt like they needed to do something to protect their way of life yet again. And yet everyone believes that like colonization is over, and that is not actively occurring. Like, if you're an individual listening to this and you're not Indigenous, do you have white sage in your house right now? Where did you get it? Where did it come from? Who grew it? Was it blessed under the moon? How many moon cycles was it blessed under, if it was blessed under the moon? Right? If you can't answer any of those questions, you should not have that white sage in your house right now, truthfully. You just shouldn't. And there is knowledge there that is being colonized by these large industries like you're talking about, and then trying to be resold back to us. And I remember this was a discussion that we had, like, was it last Christmas time too? Because we were thinking like, how could we do like a little care kit for a frontline worker? And we wanted, like, Frontline Baddies wanted to do like a $300 care kit.
Yeah, I know we were wanting to put something like that together, and that was one of the things that we had talked about, is like what should be in this care kit, and like how does that
for like self-care.
Yeah, exactly.
And some of the things that we had talked about were like a gift card for Vessi shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm certain people are listening to this right now and they're like, why would you give a gift card for shoes?
The shoes are expensive. And waterproof shoes are very useful in frontline work. And that's like one less thing a frontline worker has to worry about, you know, having proper shoes to go to work with. And
yeah.
And that's about, and like that in itself is community care, right? We're like thinking about ways how to properly support our frontline workers. What are the specific things that they're struggling with, and how can we help support them in that?
Yeah, because that's what it should be. Because that's like what our self-care should be.
Yeah, I'm not going to send a basket of candles to a frontline worker and be like, here you go, hope this helps.
Although if anyone does have a basket of candles, send it to Eileen.
Yes. Sorry, I keep bringing up candles, but
she obviously is in dire need of candles.
Like, I'm raging against it, but also please send them my way.
I mean, I would almost argue that, you know, a lot of the things that we were talking about to put into this self-care kit would have been, in my opinion, like a necessity in terms of frontline work.
I mean,
not
intentional.
Very intentional and very, like, you know, individualized in the sense of frontline work of like, what are things that you need to do your job? What are things that you need to like be able to, like, shoes? It might seem like, okay, yeah, shoes, but like, no, that's like a necessity in a lot of frontline work that you do, is you need adequate footwear for what you're doing, and that's gonna,
and you blow out good shoes quick.
Well, so we're not sponsored by Vessi.
We're not, yeah.
We're not sponsored, but if you,
we're not getting anything from
no, we're not sponsored by Vessi, or what's the other outreach workers love those big boots? What are they called?
Oh,
Bluntstones. We're not sponsored by either of those, but you know, if y'all want to like send us something, we want to have a discussion with you, because frontline workers do wear those quite a bit, because we do find those are good shoes. And even those shoes, we wear out quickly. Like I wear Nike Air Forces because they're good for your arch support. And when you're running around, they're amazing. And you don't have to worry about falling or slipping or whatever because they're like good quality made shoes, but they're over $100. And like I'll probably go through one of those pairs of shoes at least a year and a half doing frontline work. And that's not if something gross happens to them, like blood or vomit or ashtray gross water stuff gets spilt all over them, which all have happened.
etc., etc.
Like, you know, but the other things that we wanted to put in there was like a subscription to Calm, like an app to like be able to center yourself, right? Like we were really trying to be intentional in how we wanted to do that. And we decided to not do it because we didn't know how we could be intentional without making people feel like we're perpetuating this like self-care piece when we're supposed to be community care. And that's kind of what it got to, was like, well, if we're all about community care, but then we're saying like, hey, we're giving out a self-care box, like that kind of makes us hypocrites. And so we just we stopped that. I don't know. Frontline baddies, let us know. Do you want self-care packages? Like, we'll try to figure it out if you do. Like, we're here for y'all.
Yeah, like that's something we can totally revisit, especially now that we've had the discussion of like what true, genuine self-care is. And hopefully we'll be able to like put those practices into these self-care packages that we potentially could be putting together, right? So
yeah. Well, I would argue that the work that we're doing with this podcast is a form of self-care for other people to, feel seen and heard in the work that they're doing. And I mean, I know for me, connecting with Frontline Baddies and being a part of this was a huge point of a pivotal, I can't talk, a pivotal point for me in my journey to, understanding things about myself and trying to live more authentically within Frontline Work. And I think that's a really cool piece. And it doesn't really, I mean, in terms of just sitting here and talking and putting our experiences out there, it doesn't really cost us anything.
yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to the whole community piece, like all
Mhm.
over again, right? Like it's so heartening to hear from so many frontline baddies across the country messaging us in the DMs, being like, oh my gosh, I feel so seen. I feel so heard. I
Mhm.
relate to all the memes that you guys put out, all the topics that you guys talk about. And that sense of community, that sense of like you're not alone in your struggle, in itself is like quite healing. About the impact of the self-care culture enforcing the individualism.
Responsibility. Yeah.
And because in my work, when I was doing outreach, I was one of the very few like women of color on the team, and that experience was very hurtful for me, because when the individualization is perpetuated on me when it comes to self-care, it's very hurtful, it's very harmful, because I felt very alone in my struggles, and I had nobody to talk to when I was, working in outreach and fearing for my life as an Asian woman. And, you know, it's at the time, like I really look back and I like wish that there was somebody I could have talked to that could have like felt the way I felt or understood me. And I just like didn't have that support. I was constantly being pulled into meetings and being blamed for not taking care of myself enough outside of work. But I don't know, like how do I go home and sleep off microaggression? How do I, you know,
Yeah.
massage out all the traumas that I've experienced at work? It's very harmful, this idea of like individualized self-care.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue you're being very nice by calling it a microaggression. You were assaulted at work for how you looked. That's not micro. Like, that's macro.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then the response, I mean, see, Eileen's amazing. She's a very humble individual, so she's not going to push anyone under the bus, metaphorically or
You'd be
physically.
surprised.
Or
Actually,
physically.
you wouldn't do either. Um, But like the people who were supposed to be supporting you at that time, not recognizing even that your race had anything to do with you being assaulted.
Yeah.
And got me very angry. For everyone who listened to the first episode, you heard us talk about this. Like, you heard us talk about that phone call and how Frontline Baddies started. It was based off of this systemic issue around what frontline workers experience and the gaslighting that we go through, and we're told, oh no, it's you, it's not us, it's not society, it's not, you know, how we're showing up, it's you, it has to be you. And from that call, I mean, you and I both know it wasn't you, just like I know it wasn't me when I called you on that call. Like, it is colonization, it is capitalism, it's this commodification of mental health. And, you know, even all of these coaches like coming at us for wanting to do workshops. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but we've gotten a few coaches being like, well, you guys you guys are coaching on stuff, but maybe you should call me in. And it's like, no, I don't want to call you in. You're not a frontline worker. I don't want to call you into our workshops or our trainings, and you charge way more than we will ever charge for these things. Because like, we're not here to make a profit. We're not here to to line our pockets and walk away. That's the exact opposite of what we're doing. We're here to help and support our frontline worker community. So like, no, I don't really care how you feel about the format of the workshop that I created on combating burnout. I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's like the mentality of like entitlement, not in trauma informed care, not holistic care, to have the audacity to approach us and be like, hey, you should sub me in because I know how to coach people out of burnout, without even like knowing what we do, knowing what we experience in our line of work. Like, the audacity.
Yeah. And how many of those did we get at the beginning? And even clinical counselors messaging us being like, well, you know, we could do it this way. And then when we asked, have you ever been a frontline worker? Their responses were no. So I'm sorry, no. Like, have you worked with frontline workers? Their responses were no. So guess what? It's a no on our end too. If you've never had lived experience of working frontline, if you have never helped individuals with like successful outcomes and being able to maintain their frontline status and being able to work frontline, then no, we don't want you a part of our community, because you're not. And you're just doing the same thing that we're talking about in this episode right now, of like, you're just trying to capitalize off of us, and we're already not getting paid enough. We're already being capitalized off of by our government and society. We don't need to give up this space as well. So it's a disrespectful no.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Disrespectful no.
All disrespect meant and felt.
Yeah. And then to be like, oh yeah, it would be like $150 an hour to even have a discussion about it. Like, no, I don't need a discussion from you about it.
We're good.
Thank you.
We're good.
Thank you. Because if our values aligned, you would recognize the work that we're trying to do and what we're trying to do, and realize that we're not trying to make profit. We're just trying to help. Because this self-care, individualized self-care piece is just such, it is weaponized against us so horrifically, that we need something that is not that at all whatsoever. And we don't need it to become a capitalistic gain for anyone else. That is not what we're here for. Like, it's already happening to us. We don't need it. Like, the gaslighting around like, oh, you're not self-caring enough. And is this work really right for you? And like, I still can't. Like, I do vividly remember a conversation I had with a manager who, there was an incident with a youth who went off for like 4 or 5 hours, yelling at me, standing over me, like posturing, very aggressive in how he was explaining to me his hurt and his pains of being in the system from being a very young kid. And sorry, I need a moment because he passed in this last year, almost to the day. And I cared a lot for that kid. He was an amazing kid. The next day when I go in to get a debrief done, the conversation turns into like they wanted to focus on how I must have felt scared by him yelling and his posturing and not essentially like blocking me from being able to leave the office. And it was like, no, he just needed to get a lot of things out. And I was more concerned with what he said. Like, I'm more concerned with some of the disclosures that he has made and like, what are we going to do about those? And I started to cry over those things because that is what was upsetting to me. And what I got told in return because I started crying was like, some people can do this for 6 days, some people can do this for 6 weeks, and some people can only do this line of work for 6 months. And I was hitting my 6-month mark. And I'm like, what? Are you telling me I shouldn't work because I'm upset about something that I should be upset about, that all of us in this room should be upset about? Like, he disclosed abuse. We should all be upset about this. What are our steps? Like, why is now the narrative that me becoming upset and crying about the amount and the type of abuse he went through, why is that the focus now about how I'm responding to that? And the focus is not the fact that he had gone through that to begin with and no one has done anything about it yet. And like, am I the problem really here? Or like, who is the problem for not caring that this child is disclosing these things? And like, why is the focus on me and not on that?
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, if anything, like, if you didn't feel that way, if it didn't break your heart even a little bit, like, you shouldn't be in this field, like, we shouldn't be normalizing and be complacent about these kinds of things that we witness and hear in our line of work.
Yeah, like, we're not the military. Like, I don't need to be stoic. I don't need to be stoic in the face of abuse. And I'm actually going to, and I want every frontline baddie to like start questioning that. Like, why do we need to lock our emotions down when we're supposed to be getting a debrief about something that is upsetting and that is dehumanizing to that individual or abusive? Like, as soon as we start to say those things aren't big things, we start to become the things that we don't want to become. Like, how do police view violence and abuse? Are we really wanting to mimic that? Are we really wanting to mimic how military views violence and abuse? Or like, are we going to allow ourselves the space to feel and the space to say like, yeah, that's messed up and that should have never happened. And what can we do about it now? And how can we fix it?
Yeah, and it's not just for frontline workers, but as for the people that we work with as well. Like, we should be able to give them space to react in the way that they feel they need to, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like obviously it's not the greatest feeling when someone's escalated and raising their voices, but we should be able to not like have room for that and not be punitive about it. And I think that's the issue a lot of the times. It's like the minute someone escalates, it's like we gotta kick them out, or like it becomes about the reaction rather than the trauma that was perpetuated on this individual and the care that we should be putting in.
Yeah.
It is something with this kid as well, because he was Indigenous. He was over 6 feet tall. And I didn't at once ever in that feel unsafe. Like, he would have never hurt me, and I knew that. Like, that's not me being like overconfident in myself or my abilities. Like, he was just really upset. He got really bad news, and then it was like the floodgates open. He felt I was a safe individual and just released it. And that's, for him, that was probably a really healthy thing. So he didn't, go off and do something that would harm him in a real big way. And so, like, no, like, I didn't feel unsafe having a kid yell at me for 4 hours and block my ability to get out and, stand over me while I was sitting down. Like, even just that assumption on their end shows that, like, there was a complete disconnect of like principles, values, and mission right there and then.
It's not trauma-informed care, right?
Yeah, I mean, I mean that hits a soft spot for me just because my abilities, empathy, and compassion and passion for the work have been put into question quite a few times when, very similar to you, Tracy, my biggest hurdle was trying to advocate for and provide care to these youth that I worked with. And it just didn't seem like any of that was being heard. And one very specific instance was around when I was working in group homes specifically with a very big, well-known agency. And there were so many things that were happening, and this young person was just not getting adequate care from staff. We were not properly trained in any way. The young people that we were working with around this time deemed very high risk in terms of substance use and time and community,
Complex
needs, concurrent disorders. So many things are happening for these young people, and we weren't given the proper tools to be able to help them. So when these things were happening, when there would be certain behaviors, it was never for myself and other people on working with them in their home, mind you, important. It was never, why are you behaving this way? It's okay, so we don't have the proper tools to give you resources right now. What can we do? Trying to talk to upper management about it. And one time there was a very large, very big, devastating incident that had happened. And we were debriefing. It was like 4 a.m. And I had started to ask some of these questions. Well, moving forward, what is going to happen? How are we going to advocate for this youth, protect this youth, help this youth? What are some things that we can do here? And not only that, but in turn also, help staff and help us to be able to support each other while we're helping to support this young person. And basically, the director who had come to sit in on this conversation had essentially said, well, there's not a whole lot that we can do. And I mean, this is going to come up again, as you've stated. And some people they just don't have the passion. They don't have the empathy to be in this line of work. And that's okay. And if that's the case, then maybe this isn't the right place for you. And I remember letting that sink in the moment. And I was just so shocked by that statement. And later on, I did end up going on WCB for, multiple things. And I made the decision to leave that agency and focus on another place of employment because that did not sit right with me at all. And I knew that I wasn't doing the best for this young person, and I was doing a disservice to myself as well. And reaching out for help sometimes from the proper powers that be, whatever, is not always super helpful because they're not always going to be there to listen to you and help you and advocate for you and the young person, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I mean, maybe a message out there to anyone in higher up leadership and agencies, maybe just try to do a little bit better and put yourself into everybody's shoes a little bit more in those situations, because it's something so simple as just providing space. It doesn't have to be anything super intense, but just providing space to listen to frontline workers, listen to the young people, or whatever the clientele would be. And yeah, I don't know. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but just taking that moment in space and not to question the passion and empathy and hard work of the people that you are basically capitalizing on and exploiting.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. I totally feel you on that, Danny. And it's especially frustrating when it comes from HR who have never been in frontline work or sitting at their computer desk all day, being like, "Oh, you witnessed a shmun violence? Can I do that? A shmun violence? Oh, and it's affecting you mentally. Maybe you shouldn't be in this line of work." And it's like, come on, who is who is witnessing these things, these traumatic incidents happening, and are just walking away completely okay with it? That's not healthy and normal. If you're if you're looking for folks who are willingly to be complacent, who are down to witness all these traumatic things happening and keep their mouth shut and walk away without complaining, that's who these agencies are banking on working
Mhm.
for them, and that's like messed up.
Well, isn't that a profile of a sociopath or a psychopath? Not to shame individuals with that diagnosis, just to state that, I used to work in the healthcare industry as well. They have screening processes due to, like, what's her name? The nurse who killed a bunch of people. They screen for personalities like that so that they do not have access to vulnerable populations.
Yeah. Well, I still I mean, I still believe I think it's interesting because you look at higher leadership and HR in agencies for, frontline workers and providing services to certain populations. And I really do think there needs to be an additional level of, I don't know, like training or something specifically for working in those leadership and HR roles within
Training on
frontline work.
empathy and compassion.
No, no, no. Just understanding, because when you get into an HR role and you don't understand how it works, don't talk to those, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Don't
no.
talk to the frontline workers about it. And I think leadership is also not going to be the same in a corporate setting as it is going to be in these agencies and
A
around frontline
nonprofit, yeah.
workers, and when you're, when there's marginalized populations. I mean, it's not going to be the same. It's not a one size fits all.
No.
And but there isn't really. There's like, take this management training course online that's like a PowerPoint that you look through.
Yeah.
It's just, that's not gonna cut it any. I mean, it never has, but like, especially moving forward with frontline workers gaining more community and access in the internet and connecting people from all over the place. I mean, it's not gonna cut it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There needs to be more.
I'm lucky that my current nonprofit I work at, we have a really amazing HR person, and she's retiring, and I'm like quite upset by it because I've learned a lot from her. But when she first started, she had a sit down with me and asked me about my program, and she wanted to know, as like me being the supervisor of my program, what we see a lot and how that impacts the workers, and like she really wanted to know, right? And that on her part was a very smart thing to do so that she could see where our choke points are in being able to provide service for the clients that we serve, but also how to support like our staff, because our program was one of the programs that had like the highest rates of turnover and burnout and assaults, just due to the populations that we were serving, as well as the like lack of policy before I got into that program. And there, in that conversation, there were some things I brought up, and she's like, yeah, this is a U program issue. Like, this is not an issue at any other program. And she's like, but I'm here for y'all as well, so this is now a me problem too. And I think that was the first time I felt like a sense of like actual, like, this person gets it, from an HR like position. Because also, I guess maybe historically I've just worked in a lot of places that don't have HR, which is its own fun thing. But it can be done. Like, it's just something as simple as a conversation. Like, that's not that hard. Like, it doesn't even have to be a full training, just like a little convo with the leadership team being like, hey, what do you guys do? Like, can I come to site? Can I see what it looks like? Like, but it's just a small thing, but it makes such a huge difference in how she responds to specifically my team, because she knows she's dealing with a bunch of people who are traumatized. And so how she responds to them is very differently than how she responds to like another team at our nonprofit who is not dealing in the same type of trauma or the same type of like complex situations that we're dealing with. And I just think it's beautiful. So yeah, I agree with you. Like, some form of training, or at the very least a conversation,
At the very least.
should be had so that doesn't
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah.
Because that's the gaslighting. I'm over the
Oh gosh,
gaslighting.
yeah.
I'm done. I'm done with it. If another individual tells me I should not be doing this in my personal life or in my professional life, I don't know how I'm going to respond. I want to respond by yelling at them and being like, this is what I am meant to do, but I know that that's not appropriate. But that in itself is a form of microaggression when we're getting it from all sides, telling us you shouldn't be doing this work, it's too dangerous, from like our loved ones, and then at work being like, well, why aren't you coping with this better? Like, because it's not. This is just like not. I shouldn't be coping with this better. This is bad. What are you talking about?
It's even more infuriating when you're working for an agency that preaches about holistic care and individualized care, but they don't do that for their own freaking staff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if you're
Mhm.
going to have safety plans in place for your clients and community members, why not have a safety plan for your freaking staff? Like,
Really quickly, like right there, Frontline Baddies does a training on safety planning for frontline staff and how to teach leadership, how to do this training in ethical ways, and have safety plans and aftercare plans in place for their frontline teams.
yeah, like we talk about individualized care and holistic care, and like what goes into it. We look at what are the factors in this person's life that is affecting them. You know, like we look at the economics, the social aspects, the political aspects. How are these things affecting this individual person and in their journey and in their struggles? Why cannot why can we not apply that to our frontline staff when management or HR are, you know, addressing these issues? They
Mhm.
should also be using the same mentality when talking to us, when trying to support us, right? Like telling me that I'm that they're gonna force me to take time off without pay is not considering the fact that I am gonna like be short on rent. I'm not gonna be able to afford groceries and right. You know what I mean? Like these things are not in consideration when talking to frontline workers.
No, and then the lack of your boundaries being respected as well. Like, I legitimately quit a job because I was called, I'd gone 9 months without a vacation. And then I was called 2 days before Christmas to talk about an incident that I tried red flagging 3 weeks prior. And then just to be told on that same phone call that they just want to set up a time and a date for 2 weeks from now for us to sit down again about an incident that had happened 3 weeks ago. So at that time, it would have been over 5 weeks. On my first time that I've had time off in in the first 9 months of COVID, like, and then I quit on the phone. I just couldn't. I was like, do you see how insane this is? Like, do you see how messed up this is? And then at another job, me telling a supervisor, I do not want to talk about why I'm upset right now. It has nothing to do with work. It has everything to do with my personal life. I will be fine. I just don't need to be asked about my personal life. Like, let me just do my job. And that not be respected, and my ability to work being called into question, and me stating it will not impact my work, and yet still being forced essentially into telling them what was going on at that time for me, which was all bad. Like, I had a restraining order out on an individual who the night before had broken into my house. So I shared it because they didn't stop. And then it became a whole other issue. And so, Eileen, when you ask why aren't they willing to do this, the reason why, and I got that answer later that day from the manager, was that it's a litigious issue. They don't want to be legally responsible for you in your personal life. So essentially, because I told the supervisor what was going on, the fact I had a restraining order on this man, the fact that like this has been going on for 7 months, and I explained to her some of the story, not all of it, because again, I'm a personal individual. I mean, Eileen, I was working with you at this time, and you didn't know this was going on for me. I was sent home under you don't have the ability to work. So I was sent back to a space that was actually very unsafe for me to be in, without a safety plan or any type of, hey, I'll call to check in with you every like 20 minutes, an hour, see if you're okay. They took away that shift for me in terms of money as well. That's 10 hours. And then at the end of it, the manager calls me later that afternoon saying, you should have never told us all of these things, because now we could be brought into your court issues. And, you know, that's not what we're here for. We're here to help like we're here to help support our community and not to do that for you. And I said, oh, so I guess I'm not a part of this community then. And she did a little bit of backtracking. And I said, respectfully, you guys haven't known this is going on for the last 7 months. And the fact that it was brought up today was only because it wasn't respected when I asked, like, let's not. Like, can we not? I do not want to talk about this. Can you just leave me alone and let me do my job? Because this is not the time to talk about my personal issues. And then the manager backtracked and started apologizing to me. As soon as they realized it had been going on for such a long time and I hadn't said anything at work, it hadn't at all affected or impacted my ability to work. And then I believe that manager realized I could probably sue them for sending me away when I was more than capable of working due to being capable of working for the last 7 months and having the same incidents occurring throughout those 7 months without it being an issue. It's a litigious issue.
That's really messed up, right?
Like, they don't want to be responsible for your personal stuff. They don't want to be responsible for a worker who is unhinged on site. And so in their mind, if you have someone who's emotionless and who doesn't care, then they're a better worker for Frontline. But that worker is also the worker that causes a lot of these issues in these programs. Causes the divisions on teams, causes individuals to feel uncared for, causes escalations with the people that we're trying to help. But that is never discussed. Like, if you're too emotional, it's always coming back at you. Or if you show any emotion that's not regular for you, which is insane because we all go through days of where we're really better, or we're really not good, or whatever. Like, we're humans. We don't live on a line. Like, it's not how humanity works. But it's never second guessed when there's a person who is unaffected by all of these horrible things we see. That's never second question. That person being on the floor is never second question. And that is mostly the most dangerous person I think I've ever worked with, is the person who just does not give any rips.
Yeah, I agree.
So I definitely relate with the whole, like, being told or being asked, like, oh, you should reevaluate the job that you're doing because it's affecting you too much. Like, maybe go find a job that's less stressful or less risky or whatever. And my hot take is that a lot of it comes with the undertone that the population that we work with is not worth the emotional distress that we put ourselves through as frontline workers. And that's, like, quite heartbreaking, right? Because I really care about the community, and obviously, like, when people say, I hear this from my mom, I hear this from some of my friends, and I know it's coming from a place of, like, concern and love and wanting better for me, but at the same time, this work means so much to me that it hurts me that my loved ones are telling me to leave it and go do something else that would make me so miserable. Like, I was doing other things before frontline work, and none of it was as stressful or mentally impactful as doing frontline work. But my soul and my heart is, like, so full from being in this line of work. And when I was working elsewhere, making more money, I guess in a way less stressful, I was miserable. I gave that life a chance, and it's not for me. And I wish, like, people would respect my decision and choice of what I think is best for me and what works for me, right? Like,
I couldn't agree more with that. And I think, you know, you look at people in other professions and they're never really given the same sort of, like, spiel
no.
around, like, are you sure this line of work is right for you? We don't know. Maybe it's too stressful, blah, blah, blah. But you're never going to hear that about other more prestigious lines of work, like a lawyer or a doctor, et cetera, et cetera.
Right,
They're going to
and-
be like, good for you. Like, you're really doing a great service to other people. But then you look at, and then frontline workers, it's like, womp, womp. We got nothing left to provide for you in
Right.
that
And
way. And maybe you just need to leave that line of work.
and it has to do with like all the stigma that
Yeah,
comes with, homelessness and addiction and,
absolutely.
like not thinking that this population is worth giving love and care to. And that's just like a fucked up mentality, right? And
To say the least,
Well, it
yeah.
is. And like, hun, like you hit it though. And for all of us on this recording right now, like we all have lived and or living experiences in the different intersectionalities of mental health, housing, and substance use. And we've all had to experience that stigma, knowing it exists against us. And then for that stigma to be kind of like reversed Uno'd on us in our line of work is like, so, well, so I haven't been doing opioids for the last 12 years, but good to know this is still how you see me and people like me. It just, it does hit in a different way. And some of these mentalities that we have, like we talked about it a little bit on our Instagram page a few weeks back around the mentality of like, I'm a harder frontline worker because I don't get upset by having to go through more. And I don't get upset by, seeing someone die or whatnot. And it's like, well, that's toxic. Like, can we all just not take a step back and recognize that like an individual died and it's okay to have feelings around that and it's okay to honor them and their lives, and like we should be honoring them in their lives versus like trying to whittle them down to like just a death and trying to whittle their entire existence down to like, oh, it was just a death for me, it's fine. Like, because we at one point, I know I can't speak for you two, but at one point I could have been that death,
Me too. Yeah.
totally. And I think that's why my heart lays in this work of like in this field of work, is because like I see myself in this community, right? And to say that the people in this community don't deserve care, don't deserve, support, is also in a way saying that I don't deserve the care and the support because, I was at one point considered too much to deal with, too difficult to deal with. And I think that's a big reason why I'm in this line of work, because like I don't want anyone to feel that way. I don't want anyone to feel that they are too much, they're too difficult to work with, because it's again, it's the impact of colonization, the impacts of traumas that are
that are putting us in the space. With acknowledging that like we all have to do self-care. We created Frontline Baddies for community care. Like we're getting to our debrief portion. It's been a bit of a heavy episode. We recognize that, which it's why we wanted to do it. We could go on for hours about this. We have gone on for hours about this on our side. You're only getting an hour of the multiple hours we've been talking about this. But I'm curious, like I know for myself, and I just kind of want to validate all of the frontline workers and what we're doing for like our self-care, and maybe it looks different for each person. But I'll start off. I definitely, my biggest thing I do for my self-care as of lately has been taking my time in the mornings, which means I wake up. If I have some place I need to be, I give myself at least 2 or 3 hours before having to be there. I make sure that like I have my food and I walk my dogs, like a long enough walk that it feels good for me and them. And, get ready if I want to put makeup or do hair, do all of that. And though that's just one really small act that I do for myself as of recently that I've really come to love and enjoy versus like, waking up like 30 minutes before my shift starts and then like rushing around and like trying to grab my clothes and throwing my hair up in a messy bun and then like running out of the house, getting in the car, like trying to get to work and then coming into work like that. I've just recognized that like I like that 2 hour window. And so I've prioritized it, which means like I'm also now prioritizing my sleep and making sure that by that time I'm supposed to wake up, I'm feeling rejuvenated in my sleep. So I think like if we're talking about self-care and what that looks like, it could be as something as small as that, as just making sure your mornings aren't rushed. And it sounds small. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that though. And I like it. So that's my self-care that I do for me recently that I really love. It's my favorite.
Thanks, Tracy.
I love that.
What about you, Danny?
It's my turn.
It's your turn.
It kind of plays into what you were talking about, Tracy, but one thing that I really struggle with is transitioning from activity to activity, or like from at home to in the wild. And I think I thrive on structure for myself. When I don't have structure and I don't have scheduling for myself, I notice, burnout happens a lot more quickly when I don't have that infrastructure for myself in place. So I schedule time to like basically just like space out and to like have that moment of just like I can do whatever I need to within doing this activity to this activity. Whereas what I used to do is I'd be like, I'm going to be cleaning because I need a good place. Then right after cleaning, I'm going to have a shower because you need to be clean. And then right after my shower, I'm going to go do this. And I'm going to walk the dog. And it was giving me no space in between any of those things to just like be a human. Mm-hmm. And so that's that's my self-care. Be a human for like 20 minutes in between all of the tasks that I know that I need to get done in order to feel okay, but allowing myself time to rot on TikTok for 20 minutes or lay on my couch or whatever, stare at the wall. I don't know, whatever I need to do to like move myself into the next thing so it's more fluid. And then I'm not over exaggerating my day and over scheduling, and then it is overwhelming, and then my sleep also suffers from that. So yeah, just that. I don't even know what you would label that. Transitioning from activities. That's my form right now.
I actually love that. Giving yourself the space and time to be human and to acknowledge what is going on for you inside of you in that moment, because like you can't predict how you're going to feel and how you're going to react to things. Mm-hmm. And so giving yourself that space and time to be like, okay, let's check in with myself. How am I doing? What do I need to do? Do I need to cry? Do I need to scream? Do I need to just lay here and doom scroll on TikTok for hours and hours? And, just really asking yourself, what do I want to do in this moment? Mm-hmm. And not having expectations, because like, you're right. If you carved out that time and you're like, hey, I'm going to be doing a face mask during this time, and I'm going to like clean the kitchen during this time, it takes away from being in tune with yourself and your body, because you have those things like that you're expected to do for yourself. But when you have a slot of time where you're like, there's no expectations, I can literally do anything I want or need to do in this moment, I think that's really beautiful. Aww. And I really love that for you.
Thank you for putting it so much more eloquently. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, I do too. Like Eileen's right. Like that's a really big one. Like even just being able to go to the bathroom. Like we do 8 to 12-hour shifts sometimes. Guys, like go to the bathroom. Don't get bladder cancer. Like as a frontline worker, I am giving you permission to go to the bathroom. Like go pee. Don't hold it in for 8 hours. You will get bladder cancer. Please go pee.
My God, I hold in my pee for like 12 hours all the time. Oh my God.
Yeah, so true. I actually will forget. So I needed that, because if I don't go the moment that I know that I have to go to the bathroom, I will forget for another 5 hours. And then I might get bladder cancer.
Yeah, I work 12-hour shifts, and it just occurred to me now, Tracy, now that you said that, I never pee on my shift.
Never.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even
Our poor bladders.
My poor bladder.
Let us
know. Do you pee in your 12-hour shift?
That is on my to-do list, to pee more often.
Yes, pee more often.
Doesn't make me
and it's hard. Something as simple as going pee is hard sometimes, though, because when you think about it, like outreach, where are you supposed to go to the bathroom when you're doing outreach and you're on the street? Yeah. Like I worked on a unit, and there's not, you have to time your bathrooms. You can't just like leave the unit to go take a pee, but like please go take a pee. Like please time your pees, please, guys, because Y'all are too important to be getting bladder cancer out here.
That's
If
so
you
true.
take
Facts.
anything from this episode, go pee.
That's the title of this episode.
Go pee.
Self-care, peeing. Peeing 101.
We're not teaching people how to pee.
Well, no, but like to go pee. Anyways, Eileen,
Anyway.
tell us. Tell us.
Okay, my turn. So, over the past year, I've made the conscious effort to prioritize my self-care, particularly and specifically decolonized way of self-care. Because, like I said in the beginning of this episode, when I hear self-care, I get all ragey and I don't like any of it. But when I when I actually learned what real authentic self-care was, I was like, oh wow, this is how it's supposed to feel, and I'm all for it now, right? Like, so one of the things that I've been doing is leaning on community more. How that looks like is me investing my time and energy in more so into frontline baddies because, like I said earlier, being able to connect with frontline workers across the country going through the same struggles is very healing. Like getting getting out of the sense of like I'm alone in this is very healing for me. And you know, and how that looks like is me connecting with frontline workers, whether they're on my shift or whatever, like listening. Like I actually do take the time and intention to check in with my colleagues when I notice that they're burnt out because and I really take the time to validate their struggles and their distress because I don't think they get that a lot of the time. And even though I'm taking on someone else's like negative emotions, the conversations and discussions we have in itself is quite healing for me. And it's heartening to see how many people have found relatability and connection through Frontline Baddies, right? And I've had the privilege of connecting with individuals across the country, and these gatherings that I've been in have both been validating and therapeutic for me. And I'm trying to not let colonization and capitalism trick me into thinking that self-care must be done by myself. Community care, again, is self-care. And I'm trying to learn that leaning into my natural supports is totally okay because before I was hesitant to even ask my friends for support because like I didn't want to put my burden on them. I didn't want to be a burden and I need to like and that's a colonized way of thinking and I really had to unpack that and just not be afraid to ask for help when I need it. And if I and if my supports were healthy and actually supportive, they wouldn't make me feel like a burden, right? And I'm so incredibly lucky to have like such an amazing best friend who is not in this field in this line of work and does something way less emotionally taxing. Like he may not be a part of the frontline community, but he's definitely an ally in my eyes because the things that he does for me, knowing what I go through at work, has been so essential to my ability to like live and function properly. Like he wakes me up and makes sure that I'm up and ready to go for my shifts because I sleep very little. I work only night shifts, so my sleeping patterns are very messed up. And sometimes I don't sleep for 2 or 3 days and I struggle to wake up in time for my shifts. And me asking him, hey, can you make sure I'm awake by 10 o'clock? He'll be like, yep, no problem. And that seems like a really like little thing, but it means so much to me because I'm able to like go to work and be there on time and to keep my job, right? Otherwise I wouldn't be able to. He makes sure I'm like fed. He makes sure that like my cat is fed if I'm not able to make it home in time. And he provides me with these supports whenever I'm too overwhelmed or mentally drained to do. And, you know, he may not know how to relieve me of my traumas, but these little things that he does for me is essential to my self-care. Like, ultimately, it is quite life-saving. And he does this all without ever asking me to maybe look for a different type of job. And that's what I really love about him, is that he knows how much this work means to me, and he would never question my decision to continue to doing this work because he trusts my judgment. He knows that I know what's best for me and what works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And he understands that, you know, there's other factors in life, like a lot of frontline workers struggle financially. They struggle with they struggle financially and other aspects of life, and he tries to support me in wherever that is lacking. And you know, having a friend like that is self-care,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Okay, I know who you're talking about, and he's just a beauty. Like, I've never met him. I've only ever like had conversations with him over Instagram. But he's a beauty. And like, shout out to all of
He's
like
really
our
great.
best friends, and even like I mean, my best friends with my partner, right? And yeah, as you're talking about him, I'm like, yep, like my partner has done similar things for me. Like, I had a rough day at work. He knows it. I'm coming home and, you know, the dogs are already fed and all I have to do is kind of sit and he gives me food and I'm like, yay, I get food that I didn't have to cook or buy. And it's
Yeah.
just so
Mm-hmm.
small. And yeah, like just that importance of like never saying like, you need to quit this line of work. Like, my partner has never said that to me. Like, I was reflecting when you were saying that. Like, my partner has never said, you need to quit this line of work. He has said, you need to quit this job at different occasions, depending on where I'm working. But I also feel like that's a good partner to have, to be like, this job or this company isn't good for you. Not this line of work isn't. Not these kids
Yeah.
aren't.
Mm-hmm.
It's always like, this structure is not for you. And I love it. Yeah. Oh,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. There's all the good feels at the end of the
And
self-care episode. And
another significant change in my self-care routine has been incorporating trauma-informed yoga, breath work, and somatic exercises. These techniques have helped me reset and regulate my nervous system. They help ground me and aiding in releasing pent-up emotions that I may be holding on to. And before I started doing these exercises, I was very much shallow breathing. My heart rate was constantly racing. My chest was hurting from, you know, shallow breathing. My arms and legs were constantly going numb from the lack of oxygen in my body. It really affected like my hormones and my cortisol. And I wish I had learned about these practices sooner. In the past, I've been advised by multiple professionals to practice breathing, but nobody ever actually took the time to explain to me why or how. And it would make me very mad every time someone was like, just breathe. Do some breathing before you start your shift. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I breathe constantly.
Yeah.
If anything, I breathe more than the average person. And I do, okay, I have a condition. I have a condition, I have a doctor's note for it. Um, that I have to breathe more often than the average person to intake the needed amount of oxygen. So I'm like, what are you talking about? I need to breathe. I already do that. But recently, I've taken the time to look into how these breathing exercises actually really help us physically to regulate our nervous system. I grasp how our bodies react to intense emotions, tensing up and altering our breathing patterns. Without addressing these physical reactions, tension can persist and contribute to feelings of stress and discomfort within our bodies. And chronic stress can exacerbate these physical symptoms, leaving emotions trapped within our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are ways to release them. Practices like yoga, deep breathing, and mindfulness help us relax and become more attuned to our bodies and emotions. By acknowledging and processing our feelings in a supportive environment, we can begin to let go of these trapped emotions and experience a sense of release and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
It's I thought it was just placebo effect and a way to calm just the mind, but I didn't realize how much of a physical impact these trauma and these emotions had in us, and to really get to know these practices and put them into regular practice has actually been quite healing for me.
As you breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, you hold for 3 seconds, and you breathe out for 7 seconds. So I will lead us, and Eileen and Danny, please join along in this breathing technique. So we're going to start by breathing in right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to hold it for 3. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to breathe out through our mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's just one round, but the best way to do it is by doing 4 rounds of that and then waiting for 15 minutes and then doing another 4 rounds. And it naturally helps to just release all of that stress that you carry in your body. We will also be posting a video, because I am the worst at shallow breathing, of how you can see someone is shallow breathing and if you're doing it yourself. And that'll come down later down the line. But thank you for listening in to this episode.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Yeah.
if you want to find out more information about Frontline Baddies, if you are not following us on Instagram, get on Instagram right now. What are you doing? Our memes are amazing. At Frontline Baddies on Instagram, at Frontline Baddies Podcast on Instagram, and then also our website where you can find out more information about us, what we do, our workshops, etc., www.frontlinebaddies.com. Thank you so much, and we will see you next episode.
Bye.
Bye.